Hello, friends out there. Welcome to another session of 30 Minutes with a Modern Mystic. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you very much, Sascha. And this world of new tech, and not always new tech is used to our advantage.
That is absolutely true. Today's topic is the East Palestine, Ohio train crash, major disaster that just happened recently. And I'm curious to talk about the metaphysical perspective on these type of events, and maybe not too much this one specifically, but take that as um, jumping board into the perspective on those type of events.
Yeah, there's a disturbing thing taking place in the US because that derailment is not the only situation where there have been chemical spills of really great danger, and it seems to be stringing across America to include as wide an area as possible with prevailing winds, water, and the conditions. And I mean, it's almost like America is under an internal attack, but this one is rather obvious, really.
I agree. Yeah. So, what do you think, if you have any perceptions regarding the the spiritual aspects of those type of events, or of this one specifically, that you would like to
The,
share?
the spiritual aspects, the metaphysical world of this, is it's always a much, much bigger picture. In other words, what is happening, shall we say, in February or March is just a tiny, tiny frame in many incarnations. And the simple fact is that we humans cluster. I've talked about this in various times, but we cluster. We cluster according to our energy. And there is the energy of chaos, which is the engine that drives. There is the energy of order, which is the stability of structure. And then there is the energy of balance, which is the place of our greatest potential. And so this principle runs through all life. It's a bit more complicated than that. In a human being, you might, for instance, have a person who is reasonably well balanced but has anger. So when you have anger, what you have, chaos is on this hand and order is on this hand. And so what they're doing, chaos and order appear to be opposing each other. But as they go in opposite directions, they create torsion. And that torsion, if I keep twisting, will break this piece of tissue quite easily. So this torsion, there is a place where it's in perfect balance. It's now made this tissue the strongest it will ever be and the most resilient. Too much and it will break. Too little and it's back to being flimsy again. So this is how we all are. We all have this torsion, which is like a life principle in our bodies. Everything does. Even every cell in our bodies has it. And this isn't something science can measure and seems to know nothing about, but metaphysically it's there. And so you get people tend to cluster toward chaos or order. Sometimes, for instance, a monastery could be said to be a cluster of people who want order. They don't want chaos, and so everything is set and fixed, and they become reasonably static in that situation. There's no great growth taking place. So chaos is the engine that drives, and order is a stability of structure. Now, these tend to influence a person's life all the way through their incarnation, and gradually over a number of incarnations. Now, I have to add to this chaos, like when I see it, it's a color red, but there could be 1,000 shades of red. And so that means there are 1,000 different energies in that overall chaos. Some of them are highly destructive, some of them are murderous, some of them are loving. So chaos is not bad in itself or wrong. Equally with order, about another 1,000 maybe shades of different colours of black, but you get the same perambulation, as it were. There's the same energy of love or hate or rage or anything, but it's all the time stabilizing. So to put it in nature, a wildfire in America is chaos with no order, and a lump of granite is order with no chaos. And so most life forms have order and chaos in different balances. Now, I might be a bit long-winded with this, but basically what I'm saying is that you'll get people tend to cluster over many incarnations. And so those clusters become so powerful that they will incarnate into being in clusters. And if in a part of a great cluster, some are in Europe, some are in Australia, and some in America, and the place of action is going to be America, they will literally move from Australia and around the world and Europe to be in America, so that cluster can come together to go through the experience of whatever it is that is going to hold their greatest growth potential. We tend to like life to be smooth and easy and no problems, but we don't grow under those conditions. There's no doubt about it. In a war, there's more human growth probably at any time. There are those who step into their rage, those who step into their love, those who step into mercy, those who step into ruthlessness. It's a determining factor because it's so powerful. This doesn't mean we have to have that to do it. That's just the crazy way that the path we're walking. And so to me, in America, you have this conglomeration of a small, tiny percentage of people who are called the elites, the Illuminati or whatever, have tried to take control. And they're in their final throes and they're not going down without a lot of kicking. It has been said and recorded by one of them, and I'm not saying any names, that if they can't have the world, nobody will. Now that is a scary attitude. In other words, they don't care what particularly happens. If they can't own the world and therefore humanity, then nobody's going to. And so it would seem to me that this series of events taking place in America is deliberate, and it's going to be a long, slow, insidious happening because there's going to be a lot of disease come from it. However, and please don't think I'm making any judgments here or criticism, because I'm really not. I'm just saying something that is clearly visible in the metaphysical world. However, you get people, a lot of people, and you know this, who are self-critical, who are self-judgmental, who have a lot of self-anger, and they tend to form clusters which challenge each other in the various incarnations of clusters, and they don't always go a positive way. And right now, the greatest emotional energy on this planet is fear, overwhelmingly so. Love is not an emotion, so that's not even involved in this as regards to an emotional energy. And so they tend to cluster. Now, if you are self-attacking, self-criticism, self-rage, self-anger, self-loathing, self-judgment, if you are self-attacking, you will be attracted to a scenario where there is an attack on people because you're a person, and you will be attracted to it energetically, certainly not mentally or emotionally, but energetically you will be attracted to you. So life is saying, you are attacking yourself. Now you're going to experience an externalized attack on yourself. You're only here because your consciousness has created this situation for you. Now, when that's millions of people, this is what we do. We cluster into areas. The same applies to Turkey and Syria. And I repeat, there is no judgment in this. This is not about pointing a finger. We humans do the best we can, but we completely ignore the principles of life. And so we blunder along, and everything that we don't understand is an accident. There's no such thing as an accident. That means everything is separate. So we live in a separate world of illusion and accidents, which doesn't exist, but we try to use that to understand the world of connection and oneness and wholeness. And what you create, you will experience. Self-attack means you've got to experience attack externally to realize this is the manifestation of self-attack. And on the bigger picture, this is taking place now all over the planet, everywhere. It's not just America, it's all over. It's every city in Australia where youth crime is rapidly rising. That youth is bored, hating, aggressive, angry, and so they attack people and then they get incarcerated, they get attacked, and it's a cycle that's been going round. In other words, when the families are mini battlefields, then you're going to get a greater area called a war happening. And there are so many minor wars on the go today. That's a
Now
summary.
let's just assume that it's true that these incidents lately have been planned and are carefully engineered. Um, Sorry?
And carefully orchestrated.
Yes, carefully orchestrated. Let's just assume that's true. Um, Now, this process that you
Let me
just
just cut
walked
in
us
here.
through,
Let me just cut in here. There is no such thing as an accident. A train can't
right,
just derail. There's always a human element of consciousness. I agree that most of
right.
humanity say he's mad, but that is the way it is.
So, looking at this specific situation from the victim side of things, it was their level or the people who are involved and affected um, level of consciousness of self-attack and all these things that you mentioned, basically creating the energetic field that made it possible for them to be in a position, be in a situation on a timeline in a specific place where such a thing happens. Okay. Now, on the other side, let's assume it was not a natural thing. Let's assume it's not a mechanical failure. Let's assume it was a deliberate action carried out, orchestrated, etc. Now, these people who orchestrate these things, who make these decisions, the way they pick the area where it's going to take place, is that also just part of that attraction because they feel maybe a not conscious attraction towards a certain area? Yeah, let's do it in East Palestine. Or do you think they have some way of knowing? Is there any way of conscious decision making involved around the place where they choose to do these things? Because on a soul level, I mean, on an energetic level, it all makes perfect sense, and it's just the way it's supposed to be because these people self-create their lives, and that's why they're involved in something that just shows them what they have to learn. But on the other side, on the perpetrator side, let's say, um, do you think it's just some kind of energetic attraction, like magnetism, that pulls them towards a certain place? Another question could be, why does a mass murderer pick a specific mall for his mass shooting? Is there something that they feel drawn towards a specific area and that field, or what do you think?
The victim and the victimizer are like magnets, and the victimizer is attracted to the victim, whether it's on a statewide or whether it's just in a mall. Yes, there is no such thing as an accident. And those people walking in the mall, for some of them on a soul level, they're ready to leave the body and move on their journey. Others could be standing right next to them, and that's not in their the soul is not yet ready to release the body. They won't get touched. Um, we have a world, and I realize in your question you're trying to adjust for this. We have a world that lives totally, utterly lives and breathes separation. Everything is separate.
Right.
Nothing is connection, and that is the illusion. This is why we're going through now what we're going through, because where do we go when we're living a dream that has no it's losing its connection with reality. It's losing it. So yes, the person who is the victimizer and the can't go wrong in selecting the area. All they've got to do is just follow where they think, and their thoughts are attracted to exactly the place where they're going to have the greatest effect on the greatest number of people, if that is appropriate to the situation. This boils down to
Yeah.
everything. It boils
Got
right
it.
down to everything. And it's a hard one to come to terms with.
Yeah, I know, I get it. Um, how about
Yeah,
nature?
I bet the people listening have the trouble with it.
How about nature? How about the involvement of, because in this case we're talking about some form of pollution. I forgot the names of all these chemicals, but you know, it's going to be some kind of major disaster once they find out what it's all about and how much has been polluted and stuff. What's nature's perspective on these kind of things, and how does nature do with these kind of human events? Maybe you could share a little bit of your perspective
You're
on this.
talking about nature as if it's a headmaster of a school and the school's gone nuts. The
Yeah,
school has definitely
deliberately, yes.
the school has definitely gone nuts, but in nature there is no such thing as human emotion. And so fish will die and animals die, but the physical form leaves the body. But animals have no problem with that because they don't perceive themselves as a physical body only. They have a sense of a greater perception of life. And so they don't have, they don't experience death in the way that we do, because death for us is an ending. With animals, it's a continuity. And so because there is no such thing in human or nature world as the extinguishing of life, there's no such thing as a lost life, then there is no tragedy in this. Lao Tzu, over 2,000 years ago, said the mark of our ignorance is the depth of our belief in violence, injustice, and tragedy. What the caterpillar calls the end of the world, the master calls a butterfly. In other words, as the evolution moves through this, we leave the caterpillar stage and we get to the butterfly stage through a series of events that we call death. And even the final metamorphosis, death visits the caterpillar when it's in the cocoon, but life never leaves it. And actually, that's exactly what we live, metamorphosis in every moment. Right now on the planet, we're going through a type of metamorphosis where death is moving in, but that doesn't mean life moves out. But everybody, humans, we see death moves in and it's the end of life. But that's not a possible scenario.
I think we've talked about this before, um, or maybe it was in a private conversation, but basically that the extent of environmental pollution or the pollution that we produce on a physical level is equivalent to the pollution of the human energy field on a spiritual or on an energetic level. Um, so what's nature's take on all of this? Like, does nature just kind of accept it without, you know, without assessing it, without saying that's good or
Well,
bad? It's just it is as it is, and it just lives through it. Or
let's just take when Mount St. Helens blew on the
yeah,
northwest coast in America. Did nature send out emails every tree? Sorry, you're going to get hot very soon. All you animals, you better migrate somewhere else. No, Mount St. Helens blew, and energetically there were changes, and a lot of animals would scramble to get away, but most of them wouldn't because there is no death. And so nature has no, it doesn't even relate to it. It's just a happening. This planet has been folded up and reshaped, as it were, for so many times through the millions of years. You know, we've had at the moment, the Antarctic and the North Pole, well, the North Pole's leaving it, are frozen ice caps, but there's been times when most of life was gathered on the poles. It was the most conducive to life. Right now, it's the opposite, except for marine life, and that's probably the greatest proliferation around the Antarctic. But the for us, you know, all this is like an attack. It's like I say, we're floundering along to understand something which you can only understand when you're awake, while humanity's sound asleep. But nature has no problem with this because in nature, nothing is permanent. Like everything is change. Everything is change. And nature at the moment, the world or the planet at the moment, its consciousness is rising. It's on an ascending cycle, and always on an ascending cycle, there is a breakdown of the old to allow for the construction or restructuring of the new. And in humanity, now we have the destructuring of the old paradigms, which a lot of people are clinging to, and that's okay. And so they leave their body and come back and say, okay, now they either follow the old paradigms again or move into new ones. It depends on their consciousness. So this is a time back again. The answer is metamorphosis. Does a caterpillar fear metamorphosis? It doesn't even know what it is because it doesn't have an intellect to think about it. So what your question almost implied, what does nature think of this? It doesn't think, it expresses, because nature is the natural evolution of consciousness on this planet, and we are the created evolution. And if these two came together in a synthesis and a harmony, wow, what an incredible potential that would create.
Because apart from killing people and polluting the physical aspects of nature, what these type of incidents do is really inject fear and confusion and pity and sorrow into the human consciousness, right? So
Yeah. But we
whatever it is,
created, but we created
yeah,
them.
right. So yes, right. So from that perspective of someone who would want to create these events, um, for me, in my perspective, the most obvious reason would be to create yet another point of focus so that people get lost in or maintain their level of fear, maintain their level of sorrow, of all these downpulling energies, right? So I think let's talk about what is a great way to look at disasters like this, to look at incidents like this on a personal level. Most of our listeners will have a spiritual perspective on things. Anyhow, they will be trying to look at things differently. But what is your genuinely most desirable perspective on these things? How would you say is the best way to look at this?
Well, because in every moment of your life, you are creating the content and direction of every moment of your life. And you see these disasters and you realize that everybody who's in them has created their involvement to be in them. Then what I would say is that what it brings to you is, as the observers of this and maybe listening to us right now, is to realize I'm creating my life, I'm creating my future, I'm creating my past, because you are. And the way I create my living is how I will is is very much connected with how I will create my dying and my experience after death. And so you begin to realize that this power of creation we have is all inclusive. It doesn't end when your physical body dies, it continues. And then, in a way, when you look around the world, I know this is how it affects me. I look at the world and I make sure that I basically stay within the areas of balance. Now, the other day I was working and a large, huge tub slid down my shin bone and it peeled off a fair stretch of skin, and it was not a terribly nice moment. And I was pleased afterwards. Not a swear word rose up in me. There was no anger, there was no projection, there was no F words, which we mostly do. It was just, okay, I've done this and now I'm going to have to go and see to it. And there was a complete acceptance of that moment. It didn't throw my balance out. Now, when I listen to like Clarkson's Farm, which I quite enjoy, which is a British thing on Netflix, on that racing driver, Jeremy Clarkson, who I don't like, but I think I admire. Now, he's swearing just about the whole time. And swearing is violence. The F word is, I'm not sure it could ever be said without the echoes of violence within it. So even if we're talking, our language, the way we speak, we're creating our life, the way we think, the emotions. With the F word, there's generally a heavy negative emotion. That is creating our life. But people wouldn't think of that. They think, well, no, that's I'm not. Every moment is creating your life. And so when you become more conscious, then you begin to bring your life into a place of balance where you don't need to swear, where you don't need to scream at people, where you don't need to be aggressive with yourself, you don't need to attack yourself. God, if you can't give you support, who is going to? I mean, this is what we need, to be self-supporting. Then you're changing your whole life. You will not be in the clusters that tend to be where the disasters are happening. And I can assure you, whether you believe me or not, truth is truth. The principles of truth, they remain. And why we're going through what we're going through is simply because we cannot continue there is no future when you're dreaming a dream and the dream is so disconnected from a greater reality. There's no future. We're on the path to basically global human insanity. And despite everything else, dementia is still on a rapid increase.
I would argue that we have arrived at the destination already.
Isn't that a lovely note to end on? We're going nuts. But the point is like each one of us are the creator. The elite don't create your life. Nobody else creates your life. I do think when you're at school, to a degree, your parents and the teachers create your life. And then you leave school. And if you haven't been brainwashed, from that point on, you are creating your life. And it's a good idea to be conscious, because if you then continue living subconsciously, the subconscious program of your teachers, the whole teaching method, and your parents will continue all the way through your life. And at the school I went to, the teaching method was brutal. And so my first 49 years were me punishing me continually, because that's what happened at home and at school. I continued the same program. Now I don't.
That's how we lost our hair. That's how we lost our hair.
That's right. But this was when wisdom came through. He went a bit earlier.
Also, angels need a place to land on.
That's right. It's funny. I'll tell you a funny story, because I was in a room once in a house, and there was about 7 or 8 people. One was a British psychic who was going to invite me to Britain, and there was a big fly, and he kept flying around, and every time he settled, he landed on my head, and everybody laughed. And the one guy said, the psychic said, I wonder why it always lands on my head. And they looked at him completely seriously. I said, because I've got the most magnificent head in the room. If I was a fly, I would want to land on my head. Now, certainly I was tongue in cheek, but what I was saying is I've left the place where, I'm not good enough. I'm so good, a fly would choose me. Needless to say, he did not invite me to England. He was
Have
completely
you ever
offended. He was completely offended, as were most people, at my ego. They didn't see there was a wonderful lesson had been delivered. All they saw was my ego, which
Oh yeah, how
I
could you have
just
such
thought
a
was
big
funny.
ego?
I just thought it was funny.
Oh yeah, I think so too. Have you seen the meme going around the internet? Supposedly it's a quote by, I think, Confucius, and it says, "It is not until a fly lands on your testicles that you realize that you can solve any problem out there without violence," or something like that.
I haven't come across that, but I like it.
Yeah, me too.
I'm not a
Um,
Confucius follower,
Thank you,
but
Michael.
I love Lao
And
Tzu and
I have a
Rumi and
couple
some of
ideas for
them.
new modules.
But
If
uh,
you
but
if you
there's a
guys
lot
out
of
there,
there's so
yes,
much wisdom in so few words. And that's what I like. That's an aphorism, a short, pithy saying of wisdom. And if I was to give you one of those to close us off, in view of all these disasters, consciously choose love. And that is the path you will walk, and it will not take you into those zones unless that is to your greatest potential to be there.
amen. Thank you, everybody who has been listening and watching us. And as always, subscribe, comment, like, share, and see you in the next episode. Thank you.
And, be, and because I'm not a sexist, I will say a women also.